Essentiality. Essential businesses and the reopening of society. First, I will discuss the ambiguity of the word essential, and then the rationale, some reasons behind why things are considered essential, why they are declared essential, factors that modify something that make it more or less essential, and the consequences to the outcome of ignoring something essential. And finally, with our fuller understanding of essentiality, I will analyze the current reopening plan, specifically California's. We don't commonly use the word essential in everyday speech. We just use the word need. You can see this girl begging her mom for something. Mom, I need a new phone. We also say things like, I need a pee. And in Vietnam, apparently, you need to wear full protection if you go riding your motorcycle. I wore just a t-shirt and shorts, but my wife said I need to wear a mask. I tried to argue with her, but I lost, so apparently I need to. It is essential. Why is it so important to define essential? If you look simply at the dictionary, it doesn't really say anything. The word is ambiguous because there are so many different ways to evaluate whether something is essential. If you think purely about consequences, then it isn't essential to even pee. If you don't get to a restroom, you'll just go in your pants, make a fool of yourself, everybody will laugh at you, but you will still be alive. Now let's take a look at California and how the state defines essential for businesses. Gas stations, pharmacies, food, etc. It's pretty standard, right? But did you know that different states differ? Funny, given essential is supposed to be, well, essential. So that means the same for everybody. But apparently Pennsylvanians don't need liquor. It's not essential there. They were closed. And so they went across the border to Ohio to get their liquor. Actually, in India, they banned liquor as well. And the women are now asking for the ban back because there's actually a lot less domestic violence because of that. In Singapore, the plan was different. They actually first allowed manicurists and massage therapists, but after a week of that, they shut it down. And 2 weeks later, they determined that you don't need standalone drink shops. Well, you see these long lines? This was the night before the shops were going to be closed. Apparently, people need their boba fix. And what about me? How would I define essential? Restaurants aren't essential for me. Look, in America we have this beautiful marvel called frozen food. Look at this Hot Pocket. Isn't it gorgeous? I survived on this for 2 days. You get a crisper sleeve, you put inside the microwave that normally makes things soggy. Now it comes out beautifully warm inside, cheese melted, and the outside crispy. What else would you need? Well, I actually also need durian. I ate a bit of that in Singapore, but unfortunately you can't find that in America. How can they do such a thing? I need it. If you think about it, essential, doesn't it not depend on the government? Rather, it depends on the person. Some people need this, some people need that. The people who don't know how to cook need restaurants. The people who do know how to cook don't need restaurants. And the people who have their life savings stored underneath their mattress don't even need a bank. So let's review some more objective ways of defining what's essential. So coming up with rationale, I came up with 3 main reasons why something would be essential. One is forgetfulness. We forget stuff. One is quality of life. Yeah, they're first world problems, but they're real too. And the last one is codependence. We're all connected in very strange ways. Though, did you ever forget to do something you should have done and all of a sudden it becomes a big deal? Well, that's what checklists are for. This is a checklist for all the things that you have to do before you fly a 747 freighter jet. I bet you're happy the pilot does this before he takes off, right? You may have a wonderful memory, but just in case. Remember the Lion Air crash? The first 737 MAX crash? Actually, the evening prior, they had the same issue on the plane. It was a different crew. They finally went through 3 checklists before they finally figured it out. A checklist is useful because they go through all these little things that you may forget in the time of stress. And sometimes you just put it off for too long, like hitting the snooze too many times on an alarm clock. I was going to Vietnam. I had set a reminder on my phone to apply for a visa. It was a simple task, but somehow I ignored the reminder. I put it off. I'll have time until I was checking in online, and then I realized, wait a minute, I don't have a visa. And that's why you have these agencies that promise a visa super urgent for working hours. When I was growing up, I remember my dad would often not worry about low gas. My mom would definitely never let the tank go below a quarter, but my dad would say, it's fine. Even when it's empty, you know that they have a reserve in there, 1 or 2 gallons. That's like good 30 miles. But my mom fills it up because she doesn't want to forget and be out of gas. For her, it is essential to fill up the gas before it reaches a quarter tank because she worries she will forget. Next, let's move on to quality of life. This is the well-known Maslow's hierarchy of needs. At the bottom, you have the physiologic needs to keep your physical body going. And then once you have that satisfied, you have other needs to keep your mental, spiritual self complete. And if you look, self-actualization is at the very top. The idea that feeling you're doing something useful in this world. Years ago, I went to Zambia for a rotation residency. I wanted to see what it was like in Africa. I stayed in a nice house. I guess I paid $500 a month, which I thought was a lot of money. But the toilet seat wouldn't stand up, so I always had to sit to go to the bathroom. The pots and pans were burnt, so I didn't want to cook on them and get cancer. And the nearest place to get food was a good half an hour walk, and obviously there's no sidewalks. So I did end up losing quite a bit of weight. The window screen had a hole in it, so mosquitoes would come in. But do you know how annoying it is putting on mosquito repellent every single day? I thought malaria was no big deal. I knew a classmate from medical school who grew up in Africa, and he said everybody gets it. I got it twice. I'm still here. So until the last week, and I saw a lady in her 60s in the ICU dying, and I asked what's wrong with her, and they said, oh, she has malaria. Malaria? I thought it was no big deal. I took my malaria pills religiously after that, for just 1 week though. In the US, though, we have a better quality of life and we're affected by different things, first world problems, some people call them. This is Lorna Breen. If you haven't heard, she's a ED doctor from New York City. She was there in a pandemic working really hard, and she went home later and committed suicide. A Zambian might ask, so was she in debt and the debt collector was coming after her and going to enslave her and her family? Of course not. But the emotional stress, the toil for work, they caused her to die. I think anybody who's here in America would agree. First world problems or otherwise, these quality of life issues matter. They're a matter of life or death here. And then codependence, the things that run in the background that we don't know about, the clockwork that keeps our society going, like garbage collectors. Do they matter? Well, you could ask New Yorkers when they went on strike. Or what about people who maintain things? The plastics plant wasn't maintained well. There were 2 5,000-ton styrene tanks and apparently they leaked, and the people woke up unable to breathe. A thick cloud of white smog in the air. Multiple people died, hundreds were hospitalized. I didn't even know there was a guy whose job is to maintain chemical tanks. And public transportation, why do they keep it running? Can't people just drive? Did you know that there's a lot of people who don't drive and apparently have essential jobs still? Look at this. Oil crashed. Okay, so this is bad for the oil industry, good for everybody else, right? Well, apparently it's bad for the meatpacking industry as well. How is that related? Oil prices dropping mean there's not as much ethanol being produced because ethanol is there to supplement oil. Ethanol is actually expensive. It's subsidized, but when oil is so cheap, there's no way to make it profitable. As a byproduct of ethanol production, carbon dioxide is made, and carbon dioxide is used for humanely killing animals, used for chilling the meat, and also used for refrigeration purposes. Is that very clear? How come you didn't know that? Now let's move on to factors that modify whether or not something is essential. Knowledge is key. Also, how people respond, because we don't actually know how somebody will respond until they actually do respond. And lastly, time, which changes everything. Knowledge, right? If somebody else knows something you don't, their view of essential will be different. And they may be right and you may be wrong. You just don't know it. In The Lord of the Rings, the undead army was coming. They were going to save the heroes, but the heroes didn't know that. They unfortunately missed that text message. Their Wi-Fi wasn't working at the time. So they kept fighting for their lives when in reality they could have just taken a break. Unfortunately, they didn't know. That's future knowledge. You would think it'd be unknowable. We can't predict the future, but we actually have many ways of predicting the future. This is an advanced radar setup. If you could see the enemy coming an hour away, you have a lot more time to prepare than if you knew just 5 minutes in advance. Sometimes we can know the future, and obviously that changes what's essential or not. And sometimes we know the past as well. At Ryan's house, I just knock on the door. I don't bother to ring the doorbell because I know it doesn't work. How do I know that? He's told me in the past. I've tried it before. Past knowledge, experience, it does account for something. And here you have a fox curling up in a cold. Did you know that if you're out somewhere cold without enough clothing, you shouldn't sleep at night? You need to keep yourself awake because if you sleep, your body temperature will drop and you might freeze to death. That's a principle any outdoorsman would know. It is general knowledge, but it definitely changes what you define as essential when you're outdoors. Take a look here. There's two different chest x-rays. The one on the right is a typical community-acquired pneumonia, just the standard run-of-the-mill pneumonia. The one on the left, PCP, not quite so simple. The standard antibiotics you give for pneumonia won't work for PCP. I'm sure you would hope your doctor knows what you have exactly, specifically instead of treating you generally. Specific knowledge is better than general knowledge if you have it. If you know details somebody else doesn't, that's very helpful. I had a patient with Parkinson's disease who was dying. If he didn't get a tracheostomy and artificial airway in the neck, he would die. It seemed that he wanted to go on hospice, but we couldn't really understand him because his voice just wasn't very clear. His friend ended up coming in, who had known him for decades, and talked to him and told us afterwards that he definitely wanted to go on hospice. How could his friend understand him? Because he knew him. He had decades of experience, specific knowledge. And I ended up sending him home to hospice with some Cheetos, which is what he wanted. In reality, it's not just one type of knowledge. Knowledge is all mixed together. In the story of Richard Laver, who survived a plane crash at the age of 12, many factors are in play. He says he knew the plane was going to crash, so he took off his seatbelt. That's future knowledge. In order to survive, he must have also known how the plane was going to crash, though, specific knowledge. Because sometimes it's better to have your seatbelt on, like in the Asiana crash in San Francisco, when one girl was thrown out of the plane and run over by a fire truck. And sometimes it's better to have it off, like in the Taipei crash, when some people would drown because the plane crashed in the river and they couldn't get their seatbelt off in time. Moving on from knowledge, we'll talk about how other people will respond. I need to know what you'll do. No, just go. No, I need to know what you will do. If you can imagine two people starting to play rock, paper, scissors without any experience, this may be an argument they have. Obviously, yes, you need to know what the other person is going to do, except that you can't know. That's called cheating. Otherwise, this game would be no fun. The only thing that matters is what the other person is going to do. This case made the news in England because this woman was actually on her cell phone and not paying any attention to the road. The cyclist honked at her. She got hit by the cyclist. They both were unconscious. She sued and she won. The cyclist sounded his horn. She lifted up her head, saw the bike coming, and jumped back. He was expecting her to keep going forward or at least stand still. He was actually moving to the right of her, and when she jumped back, they collided. I bet he wished he knew how she would have responded. One time I was hiking on a trail that goes up and up, and I unfortunately kicked some rocks down. I didn't call out to the people beneath. After recovering from the shock of having rocks whiz over their head, they yelled at me, upset I hadn't called out to them. I apologize, but I don't actually know if I should have called out to them. Because what if I called out and they lifted their head and then they got hit by the rock? I just simply didn't know their response. And the final modifying factor, the passage of time. If your teeth hurts and you don't go see the dentist, a few months later you could get a cavity. The cavity could develop into an abscess. Then you could get very sick and get admitted to a hospital. And you need to have surgery on your mouth. At what time was this essential? Well, I don't think anybody can say at any single point in time. But the whole concept of maintenance, we do understand maintenance is essential. You need to do it. I don't know when to say you need to do it, but you need to do it before it's too late. So what are the consequences of missing something essential? Well, from a medical perspective, it's basically two things, morbidity and mortality. And then there's the economy, right, which everybody is thinking about right now. This is Tancred Millet. He's a highliner. He's just doing this for fun. He already did his stuff for today. He's just hanging off, relaxing, enjoying himself. I have a friend who enjoys doing stuff that I find risky. She calls it adventurous. Whenever I box, she always asks, "So, do you think you're going to die?" And I think about it, I have to say no. And then so I end up going with her on the activity, and I guess I haven't died yet. I mean, when you think about it, most things actually don't end up in death. Most things end up in morbidity. That's when you have an adverse effect. Somebody gets hurt. You break a leg, you lose an arm. That's bad. It's not the same as death, but it is bad. When you get chemotherapy, you're trying to prevent death, but it doesn't mean there's no side effects. There's lots of side effects. That's called morbidity. And the consequences for the economy? Well, I'm not an expert on that one, so, you'll have to talk to somebody else. Finally, we come to the analysis of the coronavirus pandemic reopening. California's opening, specifically. Here are the general considerations for reopening. COVID-19 infection rates, hospitalizations, availability of PPE, testing, blah, blah, blah. All about COVID-19. What about all that we talked about? What about all the definitions of essential and the modifying factors? Sure, Governor Newsom takes into account knowledge. He wants us to know more about the virus and know more about the status of the healthcare facilities, whether they are prepared for an onslaught. He wants more testing. He wants to be able to see this thing from far away, to see who has it, to see who is contagious. Unfortunately, there's no version of this advanced radar system that can detect the coronavirus yet. He's considered the consequences of missing something essential. This is Tancred Millet highlighting. Death is a very real issue here. But he hasn't taken into account a few things like how people would respond. I know this is California, the West Coast. People are much more compliant. They're not known to be gun-toting like those on the other side of the country. They don't protest with weapons. They don't go to beaches. Oh, but it has happened here, just like in Florida, just like in Michigan. And I think the main flaw in the plan is forgetting about the other side's response and reacting accordingly. If the other person's going for your feet, and your plan was to stay on your feet and attack it from that angle, change your plan. You gotta go up. You can't stay with your original plan, you'll lose. People think of essential in different ways. One main way being quality of life. They feel their quality of life has been decreased. They might as well be dead living this way. They feel like they're in jail without having been given a trial. To them, America is the land of the open. And there's also the issue of maintenance. Look at this list. It's so long. There's so much to do. If we keep putting it off, it'll just get more and more backed up. People may suffer from the lack of maintenance. The patient may forget about it, get preoccupied with other things. The doctor may not have time to see all the patients for maintenance because all the work that hasn't been done these past few months. And sometime down the road, not immediately, but sometime down the road, we'll see consequences and people may suffer. And lastly, he is missing specific knowledge. Look, the chair is too big. Wait, or the lady's too small. He has a general idea of what is essential. But remember, essential is specific. It depends on the situation. Different places, different environments, they have different amounts of virus. They have different rates of spread. Just like how we talked about pneumonia and how you have to treat PCP differently. than other pneumonias. The antibiotics that work on other pneumonias don't work on PCP. The patient will not get better. You have to realize people are different. They live in different places. Look at Honduras. Population 2509. Modoc County with 0 coronavirus cases. Look at LA. The city population alone is 4 million. The county has 43,000 cases. Am I treating everybody the same, whether they live in a rural area where they're used to lots of open space, or whether you live in a big city like LA where you can't even cross the sidewalk, basically? You can't even cross the road without worrying about getting hit by a car. He is mistreating certain people. Well, you may say, look at these places, these rural areas, they're getting moved into stage 2. Isn't that good? If you look again at the 6 indicators for modifying stay at home, the theory behind this staging system, the ability to test, contact trace, isolate, support the exposed, a surge capacity for the hospital, therapeutic development to meet demand. What do these things require? It's called money. And guess what? In these small places, they don't have that. They don't even have doctors. I worked here in this little town. It's actually 2 towns called Biggs, Gridley. There's a total of 10,000 people in the area. It's a small hospital of 30 people. There are 2 doctors there all the time. I'm there all the time taking care of the patients in the hospital, and there's an emergency room doctor. That's it. I was there because they couldn't find any doctors. They already don't have capacity right now. You think they're going to have it in the future? A few years back, there's a really bad drought. All we knew about it was save water. You can't wash your car in your driveway. Okay, I guess a little bit of suffering here and there. But if you look at these communities, these rural communities that rely on wells, they literally had no water. Some had to bring in bottled water just for drinking purposes. Of course they didn't shower or wash their cars, they just had no water. So I think the idea is the governor has to compromise. We've done a good job of flattening the curve. Rural counties, some places are different. They don't have the resources to develop all these plans. They don't have the healthcare capacity. They never had, they never will. Look, John Travolta was supposed to play Forrest Gump, not Tom Hanks. But guess what? They took Tom Hanks, and I guess it turned out okay.